Hey, thanks so much. Welcome back. 6 minutes past the hour. Chuck Malamut is here. The world is as it's supposed to be. Our official financial advisor in our 26th year. Chuck has many more years than that of service in his realm, but this is our 26th year of doing this Tuesday morning, 8 o'clock program. If you're new to the program, Chuck comes by every Tuesday morning in the 8 o'clock hour, all about your financial matters. And then to reach out to Chuck and his wonderful team, the Malamut Group at Morgan Stanley's Northfield office, where Chuck is the managing director. 609-383-2010 is the phone number, 609-383-2010. The following program is presented by Chuck Malamut, a financial advisor at Morgan Stanley. The information, views, and opinions expressed on this broadcast are those of Chuck, do not necessarily reflect those of Morgan Stanley or its affiliates. They are current as of the date of this broadcast, subject to change without notice. Neither the information provided nor any opinion expressed herein constitutes a solicitation for the purchase or sale of any security. This presentation is for informational purposes only. Morgan Stanley Smith Barney, member SIPC. Before we begin Chuck's program at 8:50, right after the 8:45 break when Chuck finishes up, I have an announcement that I want to share with you. It was shared with me last night right before I went to bed. I'm going to say sometime, 8 o'clock hour or somewhere. I didn't commit the time to memory, but an important announcement that we're going to make at 8:50 this morning. So don't miss that. Without further ado, good morning, Chuck.
Good morning, Harry.
How are you?
Doing just fine. It's amazing how you sign off at 10:06 on Monday, and then your world kind of changes in a relatively short period of time.
How about that? It's true.
I know there's going to be a lot of discussion with respect to Atlantic City. I mean, I'm sure you'll devote hours on end to it.
We did a monologue at 6, and obviously the program's been devoted this morning, so we're going to do more of it, during the rest of the week. We're very, very busy tomorrow, too. But if folks read my column at Shore News Today, I mentioned in my opening monologue, Chuck, I'm really proud of a column. It's about 1,170 words that I wrote last Tuesday and submitted to my editor because I was going to be leaving on Thursday after the program, and I had some things I had to get done Wednesday. So I had to get this done Tuesday. And my column holds up as though I wrote it after yesterday's vote.
Pretty impressive, for sure.
But it's what I've been hoping and praying for, because now it lets us focus on the ballot question, and also markets can now judge Atlantic City by virtue of the fact that they're not going to default, any minute, any second soon. And Chuck, and that's in your world, stability. Markets hate instability and uncertainty.
They do, Harry, and I'm not so certain how the markets will view this, in as much that I don't know if I want to call it a temporary lifeline that's been thrown out there, but there's there's a lot of work that needs to be done here.
I'm going to tell you something right now. Markets better be more mature than that statement. I don't mean that as an insult to you, because you know the parameters. The 150 days is merely if Atlantic City does not, at the local level, present a plan that shows within 5 years that they will fix this structural imbalance and hundreds of millions of dollars worth of debt, then all that happens, Chuck, is the state takes over. Markets shouldn't be upset with that.
Well, Harry, I think the best thing we can do, and what we should do is mark it on our calendars, to track the status of a number of Atlantic City general obligations, which is the full faith and credit of the city.
Yep. As
I believe was several weeks ago, we compared a particular issuer, Atlantic City issue, to not to Puerto Rico per se, but just sort of wanted your listeners to understand the complexity of what happens within the municipal bond market. It's a little opaque oftentimes. A lot of individuals and investors think they have a handle on the equity or the stock markets per se, but when it comes to fixed income, oftentimes they're neophytes, and you really need to understand what happens in this case to a municipal bond underwritten by the city of Atlantic City that's not insured,
right?
And see how that bond, we knew where it traded a couple weeks ago, and we can kind of track it as we go through the process to see how that bond trades, if it trades any better or not.
Chuck, let's put it this way. I'm going to be shocked. I mean, this is not my expertise, but I'm going to be shocked if it isn't a better situation, because let's just tell it like it is here. If this deal did not happen, there was a strong likelihood that Atlantic City would default. This deal happening, that removes that from the equation. Even if Atlantic City does not develop a 150-day adequate plan that the state says, you've done it, you stay local control. If the state says after 150 days, good try, you made progress, not enough, we're coming in. Either way, if you were holding one of those bonds, one of those municipal bonds, there's almost no likelihood now, in my estimation, that they would default anytime soon, unless the state's ultimate decision would be, hey, now we're taking over, and yeah, we're going to do a bankruptcy here. But I think that's not on the table.
Harry, I don't necessarily disagree with you, but what I think that what we're losing track of here is that the state of New Jersey on to itself is out of the 50 is ranked like 48. 49 as far as financial stability.
I'm not saying this is the cleanup crew of the millennium that's coming in, but the reality is they're going to infuse Atlantic City with money to pay their debt. So it's got to be viewed in my realm as better news than if this did not happen.
Well, yes, you're absolutely correct, and for lack of better words, maybe is it considered you threw out Atlantic City a lifeline. For survival. I certainly do not envy, Mayor Guardian and those that run the city of Atlantic City. Because,
the amount of cuts that they're supposed to make it's almost impossible.
And then to just operate the city, on a daily basis, and this overhang, so to speak, that you're lived through on a day-to-day basis, it's certainly it's very, very challenging for sure, and I'm guessing extremely stressful for everyone.
Chuck, one of the departments that used to report to you and then later in my career to me would be your hotel sales, conventions. Now Meet AC hopefully is going to get their mojo back and be able to say, look, that stuff that's taken care of now. The state and the city are partners now. There's no more ambiguity. And we can now book next year, 2 years, 5 years, 7 years. That's a big deal, too.
Harry, that's a very big, very, very big deal. And I think when you read between the lines, it does give that organization the ability to go out and sell. We can kind of take a step back and look at what happened. The rise and fall. It has happened multiple times now with the city of Atlantic City.
And, Chuck, even little mini ripple rises and fallings during just this era, because Meet AC was at a record sales clip. When we had contraction and we went from 12 to 8 casinos and things were not as over the top, hyper negative and desperate, and the financial, ruination and all these things that were being reported about, Meet AC was crushing it in terms of room nights and conventions and so on and so forth. But when all of a sudden it was like, hey, we don't know if we're going to make payroll next week, and we don't know if we can pay the school taxes the following week, and we don't know if we can pay, our regular bills, tomorrow, all of a sudden you can't blame groups, Chuck. Groups are saying, you guys don't know what you're doing in 5 minutes. You want me to book my group 5 years from today? That's tough, Chuck Malamut. It's impossible.
Harry, it reminds me of Atlantic City back when we were kids in the 60s. And, with the advent of the airplane and a lot of the racial tensions that were existing, at that point in time, the 1964 Democratic Convention, which absolutely just demolished Atlantic City.
Debacle.
And
imagine selling Atlantic City after that.
That was very, very challenging. And, so now, you kind of go full circle, and Atlantic City now has an opportunity to resurrect itself, what was very, very encouraging. What I read just the other day was the Q1 that we just went through. the revenue increases and the profit increases in the various facilities on a comparative basis year over year. So it looks like the city is now right-sized itself as far as the square footage is concerned.
And again, as long as we don't lose the ballot question on November 8th, then we are not right-sized.
Then that's a whole other discussion.
Yeah, I won't say we're dead, but we're mortally, it's the patient is in doubt and on life support. One last thing I want to say about this, then we'll get our first break in. Then when we come back, Chuck is going to have an awesome update, market update, April Fed meeting minutes. So we'll find out what's actually in those minutes. Deflation versus inflation, a very dynamic conversation. Chuck will explain the difference and what each is. Consumer spending, consumer savings, and anything else that he has this morning. I want to say one more thing about Atlantic City. The timing of this could not be more perfect. Number one, the city was literally going to be at zero, broke, with no way out within the next couple of weeks. So not a moment too soon in that respect. But also, and nobody's talking about this except this broadcast and my column as well, MPI, the largest meeting planning organization in the world, basically, they're going to be here in Atlantic City in June. And that is a critical moment of truth where the people that book conventions and sell, and create room nights and can take this business anywhere that they choose will have the opportunity to see Atlantic City in our best time of the year with this stuff in the rearview mirror, that it's worked out and that the city's not going broke. And, Chuck, I think this meeting event of MPI coming in June takes on, if it's even possible, takes on even heightened importance.
Harry, you are 100% absolutely correct on that.
My man, we'll be back. It's 18 minutes past the hour. You're listening to Chuck Malamut. We visit every Tuesday morning. I appreciate Chuck delving in and not, forgetting that yesterday was an extraordinary day insofar as the Assembly finally, this was the Judiciary Committee of the Assembly, so the full Assembly will have to vote. The full Senate will have to vote. They did add 23 things that were not a part of the Sweeney plan, but if the city doesn't hit the markers at day 150, then basically the governor and the Sweeney plan goes into effect anyhow on the 151st day. So this bill, I'm very confident, will pass both houses and will contain enough of what Governor Christie said he needed in order to sign it, that I'm forecasting, and I have not talked to the governor yet about this, but we will, that he will sign it is my belief, and then we can move forward, have a great summer, impress the people that you have to impress in order to sell this city, and hopefully all systems go, and then the campaign to defeat gaming outside of Atlantic City is not only a moral imperative, but we have to defeat it so that we do not have a second tsunami of a correction in terms of the Atlantic City casino industry. With Chuck Malamut, I am Hurley in the morning to reach Chuck and his team. The Malamut Group, Chuck Malamut, Managing Director, 609-383-2010.
Your vehicle is one of the biggest investments you will ever make. At Ed's Auto Service on Foster Avenue in Vineland, they strive to maintain your vehicle in the shortest amount of time for the best price without sacrificing quality. It's a philosophy that has worked for over 65 years. This spring, Ed's Auto wants to keep your family safe on the road. Get your vehicle inspected with Ed's Springtime Tune-Up and Inspection for just $29.95. Call Ed's Auto Service at 856-691-6034 or visit edsofvineland.com.
Not available in all states. Whoa, what do you have there?
It's a Reese and Irvy's frozen yogurt. We just had our robot make one.
A robot made your frozen yogurt?
Yes, the world's first fully interactive robot vending machine that serves 9 flavors of delicious yogurt with 6 amazing toppings. And it's available for an exclusive franchise opportunity.
How do I get my own Reese and Irvy's robots?
It's easy, but you better act now. Locations and machines are going fast. Just go to froyofranchising.com. That's froyofranchising.com. Check it out now, froyofranchising.com.
Hey, wake up with Harry Hurley and drive home with me, Sean Hannity, 3 to 6. It's all happening here on WPG Talk Radio 104.1.
And this portion of our program brought to us in part by Harbor Pines, the exclusive golf club to the Hurley in the Morning program. Harbor Pines Golf Club on St. Andrews Drive in Egg Harbor Township. So easy to navigate from either Zion Road to Ocean Heights. If you're coming the back way, you can easily get there. Same difference if you're coming from Summers Point. Just hop right down Ocean Heights Avenue. And there are several different entrances to make it convenient for you at 500 St. Andrews Drive in Egg Harbor Township. Thrilled to tell you about Lobster Fest 2016 presented by Harbor Pines Golf Club all weekend long in honor of Memorial Day weekend. Friday, May 27th through Monday, May 30th. Lobster specials include a meaty 8-ounce cold water Maine lobster tail dinner. Maine lobster tail, my favorite anywhere. And I love lobster, but Maine lobster in particular, it's a little sweeter, just something just perfect about it. And that's a full dinner for $25. Chef Miguel's lobster bisque, lobster mac and cheese, chilled lobster, shrimp and crab meat appetizer, and much more. Dinner reservations are strongly recommended. Here's one other recommendation. If you're a golfer, combine 9 holes of golf, and then you will have the perfect 9 and dine. Special holiday 9-hole rate, $25 after 4 p.m. Live entertainment is going to be taking place on Friday night with a man they call the Acoustic Fish, Jim Fisher. Happy hour prices start at 4. Music at 5:30 p.m. 609-927-0006, extension 19 to reserve. I want to just share something that happened off air. Chuck smiled. Unless he was smiling at something else he was doing, I think he smiled when I talked about the Maine lobster being a little sweeter. Because I paint – this is the theater of the mind, Chuck. That's what radio is.
Harry, it's amazing. It's how you can get into my mind. I guess if we've known each other for 36 years.
Yeah.
It's been a long time.
It's been a long time.
So, yes, that's exactly what I was thinking about as you were chatting about –
I saw you smile.
The Maine lobster.
Oh. And Jim Fraser always used to remark the way that I could paint a picture with the food. I love to eat. I love food, and especially the food that I love. And the Maine lobster.
I thought the only thing that was missing, I thought you were going to say the hand caught by Harry Hurley.
That'd be a lie, and I'm the truth in broadcasting.
This is true.
All right, Chucky, baby, market update.
All right, so Harry, let's take a quick look at where we are, and unfortunately, I mean, as it turns out, year to date. The indices, it seems like every week we're teetering on a small profit or small loss, per se, in the marketplace. The S&P going into yesterday was up 1.3% year to date. The Dow was up 1.6%, and the NASDAQ, the heavily laden technologies, for the most part, down over 4%. I think what is happening right now is that not only individual investors, but a lot of institutional and investors and hedge funds, I'm feeling their thought process is exhaustion. Where we've had any of a number of fits and starts over the last 18 months to 2 years, and you think about it, Harry, we really haven't accomplished much of anything. Now, let me throw something out there. And so if you kind of paint the picture that we are marginally higher year to date, where do you think if we roll the clock back about 2 years, what do you think the gain of the S&P has been over that last 2 years on a combined basis? My
gut instinct hanging around you tells me that it's significantly up.
Well, actually, no, it's up about 7%.
Okay. I thought it was better than that. I thought it was in the 10%
Now, when you put in the fact that is exclusive of dividends that the S&P companies throw off, I mean, you probably have a total annual return, I'm guessing anywhere from, say, 5.5% per annum. Now,
would you take that as a sort of going rate?
Going rate as a rate being a satisfied rate?
As compared to, obviously over many, many years, we have seen very nice double-digit returns. But, you look at – I'm not comparing that return to, say, the gross domestic product, which has basically been nil, but at least it's in the black.
No, Harry, we're not at all satisfied. The average return of the of large caps going back many years before the Great Depression, at about the point of the Great Depression, is averaged about 8.5% a year. But I said if there's anything you learn from this exercise, It's the fact that while equities on average are up 8.5% a year, they're never ever up 8.5% every year.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
Sure, it averages that. Because some years you're going to be at 10, 12 and beyond, and some years you might be like this, 5 and below. And when you average it, that's what it comes out to.
So if you kind of take a
that, in fairness, though, to this discussion, though, that is a very healthy long-term yield that has held up for many, many decades.
It has, and it has included, obviously, what we went through with the Great Recession. Equities were off almost anywhere from 45 to 50% in a relatively short time horizon. We don't need to repaint the picture of what happened, but if your listeners and investors were astute enough to, stay the course, they were ultimately rewarded for that. But now we're at a point where, there's a lot of conflicting stories coming and issues and reports. So, the Fed last week, as it turned out, they released the minutes from the April meeting, and most strategists were, I think if I use one word, Harry, were maybe a little disappointed. Because the Fed, the meeting minutes that came out they were slightly more hawkish than anticipated. The Fed indicated the markets were overly complacent about the prospects for, potentially near-term rate hikes. So almost immediately as that came out, you could see how the equity markets reacted in a negative fashion. The Fed, continued in their meeting minutes to suggest that, 2 rate hikes could occur in 2016. There appears to be a greater possibility for the first rate hike, and there's about a 30% chance right now. That's what they're forecasting for something to happen in June or certainly in July.
So if it doesn't happen in June or July, then the most we would be looking at would be 1, and there is a possibility none. Correct?
Well, just think. I mean, I know the Fed is not political, but as you get closer and closer to November, I would imagine
they did it to George H.W. Bush.
Yeah, maybe
it partly crushed him.
That could be the case here, but it's just very, very interesting to see. And there are some reports that are coming in that indicate the economy, has gotten better. I think, from our perspective, where we are living physically and what is happening, particularly in, that great divide, North Jersey versus South Jersey, there are areas of South Jersey that are rather prosperous, but I think what we're living through right now, you kind of throw up your arms and your hands and say, well, geez, how the economy is not very good.
No. People in southernmost southern New Jersey would say we did not emerge from the Great Recession. I think that would get more responses from respondents than those that would acknowledge that we did. I think most people do not believe that we exited the recession. Let me make a comment and see if you agree or disagree. And it's not political. It's on the merits. If they are going to raise interest rates, they should not use the general election as a reason not to. There is no sitting president that's running for re-election. I'm not trying to have my cake and eat it too. I'm mindful that if they do raise it, that it does help the party not in power, not get held accountable for it. It would hurt the Democratic nominee. I'm not being, funny with the facts here. But if they were going to raise interest rates because of market conditions, they should do it. If they don't, then it's political.
Good point. Here's what happened. Think about this for a second. As we got through 2015, it seemed as if from June on that the Fed was discussing a potential rate hike. As we got into the fall, everybody we all witnessed and experienced unfortunately the market downturn. And that market downturn was a lot of which was blamed, on the Fed. What we think happened, Harry, is that they waited.
I don't blame the Fed.
No, here's what happened.
The one mistake they made was they did raise interest rates at a time when things were not going so well. There were periods where we were doing better, where they punted and didn't do it. Then they were so locked in to their language of having to raise the interest rates that they then did the quarter of percent.
So here's what happens. You're right. I mean, they waited way too long. I mean, that hike should have happened late summer, early fall. So
I think the markets would have tolerated it very well. It was built in, right?
Well, the economic conditions that we had in place and the reports that we were receiving from the various entities signaled that the economy was doing better. So the Fed waits to December. We think it was too long to enact. Not necessarily was a rate hike, but it was the first rate hike. And so now what has happened, financial market conditions, the Fed looks at all the time. That's their job. But it seems as if, is it the tail wagging the dog here?
Maybe.
And moving forward.
I think they more, though, we have to get a break in, Chuck. I think more they get caught by changing market conditions. See, I give people credit that don't – if you're about to do something, and you're very good at this, Chuck, whether you were the senior operations executive or a senior financial executive, you're very good at analyzing, hey, I was about to do this, but look how things changed. I'm not going to go do that. Even if I said I was going to do it, if circumstances changed, I would think you'd give somebody credit, Chuck. Not you. This is rhetorical, but you give somebody credit for, like I've given the Fed credit for not just raising interest rates, but for looking at true market conditions and pulling back where it wasn't the right thing to do.
Why don't you take your break, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about that.
And in addition to that, Chuck is also going to tell you the difference between deflation versus inflation, consumer spending, consumer savings, and whatever else comes up. And then I have a very important announcement to make right after Chuck, probably at about 8:50 when we come back from the break. For nearly 4 decades in the Ducktown section of Atlantic City at the corner of Arctic and Georgia Avenues, Angeloni's 2 Restaurant and Lounge has featured the finest Italian-American cuisine in Atlantic City, preparing all meals to order. Lunch is served Monday through Friday, dinner served 7 nights a week. Every Monday, Angeloni's 2 presents the most interesting Monday nights. Mondays at the bar from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m., featuring $2 Dos Equis beer, $2 Miller & Miller Light, $5 New Amsterdam martinis, $5 appetizers, and additional complimentary food will be served on the hour. The food will change weekly, at times even hourly. Happy to report Mama Angeloni Sundays from 4 p.m. to 11 p.m. still in effect. A wide variety of fabulous 4-course $25 dinner selections remain in effect for parties of 10 or less. For more than 10, just turn to Alan and he will customize a party package that works great. To make a reservation for lunch or dinner, call Alan Angeloni. Tell him I sent you early in the morning. 609-344-7875.
Hi, I'm Ron Rossi with Rossi Honda and Violent, and our May sale event is happening now. Summer is almost here, and payments on the all-new 2016 LX Civic have never been lower, starting at only $99 per month. Looking for something larger? How about the redesigned Accord LX with Apple Play, starting at only $119 per month? And as always, on every Rossi Honda lease, the oil changes are free, up to 3 years or 36,000 miles.
$29.95 down. Tax, tag, stock fees extra. 36-month lease. 12,000 miles per year to qualified buyers. See dealer for details.
Need a sport utility for the summer to go to the beach? Rossi Honda has you covered. All 2016 Honda CR-Vs, HR-Vs, and Pilots are specially priced during our May sales event. So come on in to Rossi Honda for the best selection. At Rossi Honda, we treat you better, period, for less. On Delsey Drive in Vineland.
Hi, it's Mark Levin. Join me at 6 this evening. Now back to the mayor of the morning, Harry Hurley, on WPG Talk Radio 104.1, South Jersey's talk station.
Hey, thanks very much. Welcome back. 35 minutes past the hour. You are listening Tuesday mornings in the 8 o'clock hour to Chuck Malamut, our official financial advisor in our 26th year together here on Hurley in the Morning together. Chuck leads his group, the Malamut Group, as managing director at Morgan Stanley's Northfield office. For all of your financial planning needs, turn to Chuck and his team. Tell him and them that I sent you, 888-383-2010. You'll be very pleased that you did. Chuck, your show's going great, and I know you have a lot more to impart.
So let's finish real quick on the Fed. So as indicated, one or two hikes potentially this year. The Fed clearly stated that any future moves are going to be obviously data dependent, and
good should be.
Additional rate hikes seem somewhat inevitable, in as much, Harry, that economic growth appears to be improving, and inflation that we haven't talked about in years is now starting to rise somewhat. So we're not sure of the timing. The Fed obviously doesn't want to rattle investors, but it's aware that rate hikes are going to when they do that, that's going to happen, as evidenced in what happened after just the meeting minutes were released. So when the next rate hike does occur, we expect some additional market volatility, so you need to be conscious of that. But
how likely is it that there'll be at least one rate increase in 2016?
I'm pretty certain we're going to have at least one.
I think so, and I'm thinking we're only going to have one.
And so if we live through, and
you think it'd be about a quarter of a point again?
I think so.
Yeah.
But what'll happen is, once you get through that initial shock, we think that the economy and the equity markets should be able to overcome, any of that turmoil.
All right, before you do a tutorial, and it's going to be great, on deflation versus inflation, this is a very important part of Chuck's program. I want to hold Chuck harmless from what I'm about to say, but somebody out there that has the weight, tell Alan Greenspan to shut up. It's very, very unprofessional. I've not seen a former Fed chair ever behave the way that this one does. You're not the Fed chair anymore. It's time to just write a book, go do something else, enjoy your news, wife, and vacations with Andrea Mitchell. But this former Fed chair that still thinks that he stirs the drink, Chuck, I don't want to hear him one more time criticize and say his tripe. So I'm holding Chuck harmless from that rant. Chuck, I return it back to you. Deflation versus inflation.
All right, so Harry, I won't even comment on that.
I didn't want you to.
Okay, because.
But he shouldn't.
But I'll leave it at this: when you retire from whatever position it is, you retire.
Yes,
and that means you go on to the next phase in your life.
Yeah, I'm consistent in this, Chuck. Former presidents should not undermine current presidents. Former Fed chairman. Chuck, in your lifetime, can you name one that's ever done this before?
No,
they don't do it. And this one does. Anyhow, I had to say that. Deflation.
All right, so let's talk about a little bit about the deflation right now. So it has eased significantly from the beginning of the year. Global growth, for the most part, has shown some signs of improvement. We every week for Harry, it seemed like for 6 or 8 weeks, we always talked about the devaluation of the Chinese currency. Have you heard anything about it?
No.
Nothing.
No.
So that has sort of faded off into the sunset. And, oil...
Actually, Chuck, we heard that the Chinese were trying to devalue our currency.
So oil, as we know now, it kind of hit the wall recently, but we've had, a remarkable rebound in the price of oil in a relatively short period of time. So all those factors, on a combined basis, Harry, dramatically reduce global deflationary risks. Because again, you think about what the Fed has to deal with. They're obviously concerned about deflation, and as concerned as they are about deflation, they're more concerned about inflation. So what is happening? It looks like, from all the reports that we're seeing, CPI rose 0.4% in April. I don't see you. There you go. Okay,
I'm always willing to clap for fractional growth.
And that was, Harry, the sharpest increase that we have seen on a month-to-month basis since February 2013. So, gas prices, over that time period. I know that you talk about your corner store and how the prices go from one week to another, but gas prices, nationally speaking, ended up increasing over 8%. For the month of April. So when you look at the increase of commodity prices, that should push headline inflation, what is really inflation, around 2% during the second half of this year. So the Fed obviously has to be concerned about inflation.
Which you always talk about, not too hot, not too cold, and it is very, very hard, and you can't time the market, and all these Malamut principles that I've enjoyed for the past more than quarter of a century. Let me throw this out to you, Chuck. I'm not rooting for inflation at all. So let me make that clear. However, if there is inflation, then our senior citizens, for the first time in a while, they're going to get a COLA on their Social Security because they've gotten no increases several years in the recent past. So I'm not wishing for inflation because obviously that means if you're just paying more and you get a little more, it probably doesn't even add up to make up the difference between the increase. Because if we have inflation, then prices are going to go up, correct?
They will, Harry. And
is there any redeeming quality? Would a COLA have any redeeming value in an inflationary environment? Obviously, you'd have more money.
Well, you have
because your Social Security is going to be increased because they're not getting increases while there's no inflation.
That's correct. There's been very, very small increases of in the last several years. So, I think the Fed is most concerned about what I'll describe as potentially runaway inflation. They have to be very, very concerned about that. We don't see that happening. But what has happened, Harry, is the fact. Think about this for a second. For the last 2 weeks, let's talk about the consumer here. We'll shift right over there for a second. We saw some very, very weak earnings from a lot of the retailers. Macy's, Nordstrom's, Kohl's, the hit list goes on and on and on. But overall, consumer spending has remained, pretty solid on a comparative year-to-year basis. So
people are buying other things besides
those. Yeah. So what is happening? We're seeing that traditional brick and mortar, and we've talked about this in the past. Retailers really come under a lot of pressure, particularly in clothing stores and department stores.
And they're closing these stores.
Yes, they are. But overall retail sales they're growing. And they're growing because what I'll call the disconnect between online shopping and going actually into the store.
I mean, Chuck, look how easy it is now. You don't have to go to the store. You order it through Amazon.com with Prime membership. You get free shipping. The thing is there in 2 days or less. If it doesn't fit, you send it back. You get the full credit. You get the next thing sent to you, or you cancel it. And, I mean, the day of the fixed store being viable is in grave peril right now.
The shining star for bricks and mortar, Harry, has definitely been, the home improvement.
Absolutely.
I mean, because obviously,
but that's different. You need it now. You got to go get it.
And it's very, very tough to
You're not going to
ship.
order a sheet of plywood or 2x4s, through Amazon.com. So that's true. So those stores.
But all, if you take retail sales as a whole, bricks and mortar, online, what we think will be happening here, Harry, the second quarter retail sales are on track for a growth rate of about 5%, which was in line with what we saw in the first quarter. Consumer spending, and that's what we always talk about. Consumer spending looks like it's going to rise about 1.9% in the first quarter. That's where we were, to close to 2.5% in the second quarter. So the consumer spending, I think, what no one has really recognized here is the savings rates.
Yeah,
because we've always talked about.
Well, people have been saving, right? While they're not spending,
they have.
Saving.
So what has happened? Consumers are spending more, and at the same time, the savings rate is also increasing. So, if you go back before the Great Recession, the average U.S. savings rate was about 2.5%, and now we are just over 5%, which is pretty remarkable. Considering all the economic challenges that we've had, when you look back, the savings rate was always trending lower as we as Americans were spending, beyond our means. The fact that, U.S. consumers now have healthy savings and their spending patterns, the way they are set now, is good news for spending in the future and the overall broader economy. So, yeah.
Well, Chuck, I have to say, as a layperson, that sounded very healthy, what I heard. If people are spending more and they're also saving more, that's a beautiful thing to hear.
Yeah, so what happens, Harry, as we look at the equity markets and we started our discussion today, they seem rather tired. And I think we obviously need to work through who is going to be running our country, and I guess obviously we'll come to that conclusion relatively sooner than later.
5 months.
So while the quality of earnings, from companies, domestic companies, has deteriorated somewhat over the last several quarters, we don't think that's going to continue. We think we hit the trough in Q1 2016. Ultimately, we should have better earnings as we get into the future. While equities might look to be not terribly inexpensive at this point in time, we don't think the valuations are particularly stretched. It's a matter of clearly understanding, and we talk about this all the time, what you're buying and why you're buying it. Yeah. Oftentimes a client will call and say, "Look, I want to buy, shares of X, Y, and Z," and my immediate thought's going to be, "Well, tell me why you want to do this." And if they don't have a good explanation, you really need to understand why you want to make that purchase. So, there is more to it per se than just buying the indices at times.
Chuck, your program's always listenable, really informative today. Outstanding job. You've been listening to Chuck Malamut. He's the managing director of his group, the Malamut Group at Morgan Stanley's Northfield office, 609-383-2010. That's 609-383-2010. The program you just listened to was presented by Chuck Malamut from Morgan Stanley. The information, views, and opinions expressed on this broadcast are those of Chuck, do not necessarily reflect those of Morgan Stanley or its affiliates. They are current as of the date of this broadcast, subject to change without notice. Neither the information provided nor any opinion expressed herein constitutes a solicitation for the purchase or sale of any security. This presentation is for informational purposes only. Morgan Stanley Smith Barney, member SIPC. Chuck, outstanding. Gold
Harry,
star performance.
Thanks again for having me. We'll see you next week.
You got it. We'll be back in exactly 2 minutes rather. 2 minutes make that. And when we come back, news that I need to share with you that I learned about last night. Tell you all about it next.